So it's the middle of August right now, and when it's the summertime, I typically try to ride bikes outside as much as possible, not doing Zwift hardly at all. And it's, mid to late summer, so I haven't been riding Zwift regularly for quite a while now. But it's a rainy day outside, so I went ahead and just broke out the Zwift bike and loaded up a 20-mile route and then went back into it. It made me remember some of the things that I really like about Zwift, but also some of the things that I don't like. So I thought I would just kind of go through some of my favorite things about Zwift and some of the things that I really don't like very much. So when I broke out my smart trainer and loaded up the Zwift route and started riding, one of the first things that stuck out to me today is how much worse my fitness has got since I stopped riding Zwift regularly sometime in early spring. And there's a lot of reasons to that, but it's pretty easy to tell, specifically on Zwift or any kind of smart trainer, because you can see an exact readout of your watts, your heart rate, your pace, your cadence, all that kind of stuff. And depending on the bike that you ride in real life, you may have a good power meter and cadence readout. I personally don't have a power meter on my real bike and real rides. When you're riding Zwift, you can very much tell from one day to the other if you're riding worse or better, because you can just see how much output you're making. So that's probably the main thing that I really love about Zwift, is that if I'm riding Zwift every day or if I'm riding in real life every day, for me personally, I'm getting a lot more fitness by riding Zwift every day. There's a few reasons for that. One of the things is being able to see your metrics in real time, but part of it too is the type of workouts that you do. There's the ERG workouts where you can just hold yourself at 200 or 250 watts or whatever you want to do. You can just be forced to hold down certain wattage, and that's really something you can't do in real life very easily. So that type of training is really unique to a smart trainer. So that ERG mode is useful for a lot of things, but one of my favorite ways that you can use it in workouts is to do intervals. So you can program your own workouts in Zwift, and I do this a lot, where I'll just do a warm up at 160 watts, then I'll do intervals of say 30 seconds of 250 watts, 1 minute of 180 watts, and do as many intervals of that as I want. There's a lot of different versions of that kind of thing, but having those really structured workouts can give you a lot of control over what type of workout you're having. And in real life for me, I typically just kind of ride how I feel like riding, which makes me ride a little bit more lazy. And while I'm having a lot more fun in the real world, the amount of fitness that I'm maintaining with my workouts is a lot less than what I'm getting out of Zwift workouts, where it is super structured and where you have a lot of control in planning the workout in advance. So not only can you plan super structured workouts, you can also track your workouts so much more easily, because you can see all of the data. You can see your average watts, you can see your average speed, all these things. And it tends to be a little more detailed and granular than what you get out of just your normal Garmin, at least with the equipment that I have, where I'm not using a power meter, I'm just using really heart rate and then recording my route on a Garmin in the real world. You get a lot more feedback on how much fitness you have at the moment. So not only are the workouts more structured, but at the same time, you can track your fitness in a way more detailed way. And the other thing about Zwift workouts that kind of sticks out to me is it's a lot easier for me to be consistent and do the exact kind of workouts I want every week and throughout the month, and have a training plan and stick to it. I'm a lot better at doing that with Zwift than I am in the real world. Out in the real world, I tend to just ride how I feel like it. And I think there's pros and cons to that, but the point is that I'm a lot more consistent with sticking to a specific plan, or making a plan and then sticking to it when I'm riding Zwift, comparatively to doing real riding out in the real world. And obviously one of the best parts about Zwift is just how convenient it is, because on a day like today where it's raining outside, or when it's the winter time, or whatever it is, and you can't really go ride outside easily, it's super awesome to have something where you can just ride inside in front of your TV at home. Now, there are a few things that I don't like very much about Zwift, and some of these things are unique specifically to my setup or my version of fitness or whatever, but the first thing that really sticks out to me that I don't like about Zwift is just it being not very comfortable. And again, this is unique to my setup, but the most obvious thing to me about it is that you have a saddle that is just rigid. It's just stuck to the ground, and as your body's moving around, your bike isn't moving with you. It's in the real world when you're riding, as you pedal, your bike kind of sways with you and it's a lot more flexible and moves around. But when you have a saddle that's just perfectly stiff, to me, it gives you a pretty strong limit of how long you can ride or how long I can ride before I just get really uncomfortable, just from like having your sit bones kind of like shimmy around like a very stiff object versus being on a real bike where it can kind of shift around with you as you move or as you kind of pedal. Now, this complaint is super subjective, of course, but to me, especially the longer I've been doing Zwift, the more just kind of like boring and uninspiring it is. While it's cool to get all that data and all of that kind of feedback about how you're performing, it's also not super inspiring or exciting to just be looking at your TV with like a leaderboard and all the stats up and then have what's, you know, I'm not saying it's not a good looking game or whatever, but it obviously doesn't compare to riding outside in the real world where you can go explore, you know, routes that you have never been on. It's apples and oranges to what it feels like to ride in the real world. So again, you might not find it boring, but to me, by the time I had been riding all through the winter, at some point I was doing it as a chore and I was not excited to go get on the bike and do more Zwift workouts. Whereas riding in the real world, I typically enjoy the process of going, finding new routes, exploring, and just going out and riding. And along those same lines, if you've been riding Zwift for a while, it can start to feel just a little bit too clinical and kind of uninspiring. That same kind of just very data-centric thing that can make you feel, for me at some point I get too in my head and I'm really focused on metrics and numbers and output and this kind of thing. It's not for the fun of riding, obviously. It's really all about fitness. So in a way, it can be too obsessive on the fitness component and not really enjoying the process of like the workout or just enjoying going out and riding. So obviously that's to be expected with like a virtual, you know, smart trainer, but it's one of those things where if that's your main version of cycling, it can get a bit boring, it can get a bit too clinical, it can make you feel like all you're thinking about is just the fitness component, not even the sport itself or not even like the fun parts of it. So all that said, I feel like it's good to have a really balanced version of it. During the winter time, I had my Zwift bike out. I'll kind of roll some footage over of what my setup looks like, but I have it out in my living room in kind of an out of the way place, just set up in front of the TV. And what I would do is every morning before work, I would wake up and I would just get a 10-mile ride in. And I would do that like Monday through Friday. And then on the weekends, sometimes I would get out if the weather was nice, but I was only riding about 50 miles a week, but because the workouts were so structured, I actually had really good fitness during that time. So I think I'm probably actually going to go back and try doing that for a couple weeks and see if I can get back into that routine. When the summer rolls around, I end up not working out in the morning. I get home from work and then right after work, I'll go do a route in the real world. As of right now, what I think I'm going to try for the next couple weeks is to just start doing Zwift, you know, 10 miles in the morning, every morning, do like a group ride and then maybe one real ride on the weekends, which should be closer to 100 miles a week. I'm interested to see what my fitness will do and also to see if I can still enjoy that process because there is something really nice about having that structure. But again, it's great to be able to mix in some real world riding too, so it doesn't feel so kind of clinical and uninspiring and boring. But that's sort of my plan, is to try to mix it back into my training a little bit. It was a little bit eye-opening to see how much my fitness changed when I don't have that consistent, really structured kind of workout. Long term, I think I'll still maintain probably mostly using Zwift as like something to do during the winter time a lot, but then I'm starting to realize that not having it at all in the summertime is a pretty negative thing. So I'm going to figure out and kind of experiment how I can mix in some Zwift riding within my weekly routine, all the while still like doing group rides, still doing, you know, real world rides, exploring routes. So yeah, anyway, I'd be curious to know what you guys think if you've had a similar experience where you ride a lot in the winter on Zwift and then you get back into a basically fully in-person routine, and what that does to your fitness. And I'll come back with an update here in a couple weeks and see how it's changed for me having implemented it back into my routine. But yeah, thanks for watching. Peace out.